Some of my favorite Roblox games in the past were PvP games with destructible environments. This used to be a decently popular genre up until 2016 when Roblox removed support for voxel terrain. It's not as if these games couldn't have been made without it, they existed both before and after. It just complicated things. When it comes to the building aspect, the old terrain was much easier to work with as a player. It broke down into a handful of cell shapes which all fit perfectly on a 4-stud grid. The shapes of these cells also removed the need for developers to include part-based building systems, since you could already make perfectly usable structures with just the terrain. But if you did want to include parts, they could easily be attached to the flat surfaces of the terrain. It kinda just did it all. Well, except being drivable and looking good. The terrain only ever went up at a 45-degree angle, so you couldn't exactly make sloping hills. Anyways, fast forward some years later, and we're starting to see this genre come back. My personal favorite example being Scorched Earth, but there are multiple other games you've likely heard of that fit this description. That's not what this video is about though. I wanted to show off 2 games of this type that you've never heard of. Both of these are relatively new and early in development. They're actually quite different from each other gameplay-wise. One of them is a modern tactical shooter, and the other one takes place in a fictional setting with a bit more of a focus on building. Here we go. So by the time I finished making this video, the game exploded in popularity. I'm very happy for these guys, but I'm also kinda salty because my title doesn't make sense anymore. By the way, big thanks to Greenslayer4598 for posting this game in my Discord server. I probably would have only found out about it now had it not been for his message. Anyways, Scopes and Shovels 2 stood out to me as being especially unique because of its building system and aesthetic. But what really kept me coming back was the combat. Even though it's pretty early in development and things aren't as complete as they'd like, it feels uniquely fun and dynamic. Aside from your usual shooter stuff, you can do things like build a Gatling gun, throw shovels at people, blow them up with propane tanks, I prefer the term Hank Hilling, or even make them slip on a banana peel. Also, no, I didn't fall for it, that was a choice. And of course, the destruction system. Although it's simple mechanically, the way the structures fall apart is visually entertaining. It also didn't take long for me to pick up on the fact that all you have to do to destroy something is dig under it. Alright, I'm gonna divide the rest of this into categories because I'm rambling a bit. Loadouts. There aren't that many weapons in the game currently, but there's enough to give you some variety. This game uses a pick 3 loadout system where 2 of your slots can accept primaries and the third one is only for sidearms. The primary slots also accept utilities which change your class. I'll get to that later. None of these weapons seem to be a bad choice, so pick whatever you like, but here's my opinion on each one. Up first we have the Brushington. This is kind of the try-hard gun. If you want to repeatedly end matches by winning, use this. The reason why it's so good is because you have to take part in some close-range fighting in order to capture the last point. The same is true for the Tunnel Gun, which is just a double-barrel shotgun. I think it has a bit more range and you can take a follow-up shot much sooner, with the obvious downside of it only having 2 rounds total. There is another close-range oriented weapon which isn't a shotgun. It's a submachine gun that's just the Mauser C96, but doing damage over time rather than instantly isn't quite as good. I don't think this weapon's bad, it's just it wouldn't be my first choice. Up next we have the Kelly rifle, which is a bolt action. I think this thing will kill with a headshot at all distances, and if you crouch it's pretty accurate. This is probably the best long-range weapon in the game, but there's another competitor, which is this thing, the Martini Henry, or they're calling it the Washington. This is a single-shot breech loader, which does more damage, but at longer distances, the shots to kill are the same. This is redone in post because I was initially wrong about this thing. It does have noticeably better velocity and accuracy than the Kelly rifle, as well as damage at close range. As a sniper, you're more likely to land your shot with this, but you get less ammo. And the last weapon is the Winchester. If you don't feel like picking between long or close range, this one kinda does both somewhat well. The accuracy isn't quite as good as the Kelly rifle, but I think you're still gonna get those headshot kills if you manage to land them. You also get 10 rounds instead of 7, and you can shoot them faster. In the melee section of the primary slot, you can see something called the metal rod, As a melee, it's not very good. Your guy doesn't seem to know how to use it either. He just kind of uses it like a baseball bat. This thing is a javelin. You could throw it super far and impale people. And also, for some reason, it sets off ammo pretty quickly. If I see people setting up a bunch of artillery or Gatling guns, I'll just target their ammo with the javelin and then it'll blow up pretty quick. Another thing you could throw, which goes into the primary slot, as previously mentioned, is the shovel. This is actually an effective weapon. If you have access to ammo, you could just throw these constantly. It's also the best melee in the game because I'm pretty sure it's the only one that does 50 damage base. But of course the main reason why you'd pick the shovel isn't to use it as a weapon, it's because you can dig with it. In this game, in order to build stuff, you need to require resources, and resources are, I guess, dirt and grass. So just go around and eat the earth, and then you can spit it back out as weapons of war. But of course, you can't build stuff with just the shovel, you need this, which is the construct tool. Something I like about the building in this game is that it's instant and you can spam stuff as long as you have the resources for it. So a strategy that I like to do is to make these towers to climb the final objective. Despite how obvious this strategy is, they never see it coming. It just works all the time. It's pretty funny. By the way, the hammer and the shovel are under the class section of the loadouts. Something interesting about this game is that depending on what classes you pick, you get different cosmetics for your character. So if you pick both the hammer and the shovel, you get this kind of bearskin cap depending on what team you're on. I guess once you get more familiar with the game, you can see someone and immediately know what role they have, which is pretty cool. The other classes are all musical instruments, and some people just play them and be pacifists, which is fine. But they do have a purpose, and it would be cooler if they tried to use them. The most useful of these, I think, are the drums. It increases the dig speed of nearby teammates over double. So actually having one drummer and one shoveler is faster than having two people using shovels. I've never actually tried it, but apparently the hurdy-gurdy increases accuracy. It's in the primary slot, so it must do it to a pretty great degree. But again, no one's really ever tried this from what I've seen. It might make the trench carbine useful as like a machine gun. And finally we have the pipes. They don't do anything at the moment, from what I can tell. So yeah, if you want to be truly useless, bring out the pipes. That's all for the primary slot. Let's move on to the secondaries. There's a revolver and like a pocket sniper thing. It's basically the Washington light, and then the revolver is kind of like a Winchester light, I guess. They're both pretty good. Most of the time the revolver is the better choice. There's also a trench mace. I didn't see a purpose for this really. If I'm relying on my secondary, that probably means I don't have a primary weapon. And if I don't have a primary weapon, I'm probably using the shovel. And if I'm using the shovel, I don't need the trench mace. Finally, all that's left for the secondary slot is the fife. This doesn't seem very good. Apparently it boosts your HP regen. It is a secondary. Would you use it? No. I'm guessing this is more for like pacifists who want to just play music. Building. So, like I previously mentioned, you need the construct tool and you need resources to get started. They've designed it so that way digging grass with dirt gives you 2 resources, whereas just digging dirt gives you 1. Go for the grass first, I guess, unless it's inconvenient. And an important thing is that you build a fort on a base. If you build a fort outside of a base, it could work, but people could just dig under it and it's gone. So if you actually want to defend something, you want to build it on the point, which is indestructible. And that brings us to emplacements. There's 2 at the moment, a 120mm cannon that fires, I guess, HE shells, and a Gatling gun. Most people don't tend to bother with the Gatling gun. I think it's not just how effective the 120mm is on target. It is kind of trickier to aim the Gatling gun, I think. That might be completely wrong, this is my opinion here. But you can't fire either of these weapons without ammo, which is something else you have to spawn in. As you might have seen in some of the footage so far, you can just shoot at the ammo and blow it up. Some weapons do it quicker than others, but it's always funny to take someone off guard by blowing up their ammo. The last kind of buildables are traps. They're not particularly effective, they're just kind of more of annoyances. Besides the spikes, which I've seen some effective uses of, if you place spikes at the base of the enemy tower, there's a good chance they're going to fall into it. If you do like a corner in your tunnel and have a pit on the other side of the corner, there's a good chance they're going to fall into it. And finally, if you dig a pit to the center of the earth and put a banana peel, yeah. Someone might fall into it. There are some other mechanics related to combat that I haven't talked about, specifically the accuracy mechanic. If you're running around or jumping, your gun's gonna have terrible accuracy. If you actually want to hit something that's at a decent distance away from you, you want to stop, maybe even crouch, and then take the shot carefully. Finally, all weapons can melee, but the melee on the rifles isn't as effective as the shovel, so just keep that in mind. I think you should be able to hit people over the head with the construct hammer, just like you can with the shovel. I think they should buff the melee damage on the metal rod to make it more of an actual melee. I think they should buff propane, and I think they should add an even bigger bomb you can construct using resources. Maybe a barrel of black powder or something, I don't know. And I have one final suggestion. What if things that broke apart and fell on players did damage to them? So if you broke up a fort at the top of one of these capture points and a giant wooden plank falls down on you, it just kills you. Might be funny, might be interesting, but yeah, obviously I have a very high opinion of this game and I recommend it to everyone. You've already heard of it probably because it's starting to blow up. It's at 100 concurrent players right now. Coming from 0, that's infinite improvement. I briefly covered this in my last video, but you probably didn't see that one. Hollow Point is a sandbox FPS with some realistic elements. Things like the penetration ballistics, destruction, and the sound design. There's also a large variety of weapons and equipment to play around with, and soon, weapon customization. You do have to unlock this stuff, but all guns are deadly, so what really matters is the skill of the user. My personal favorite is the PPSH-41 since it has great magazine capacity and low recoil. It works especially well at night since you can just aim using the tracers. Anyways, what I recommend unlocking first is better night vision. That does make a difference. Gameplay. So most of the time when you join Hollow Point, you're probably going to be playing on this map in the TDM mode. It might seem kind of unintuitive and directionless, that was my first impression at least, but if you utilize the tools available to you, it can be pretty fun. I say utilize the tools because most players don't. They repeatedly run at you without attempting to build or dig, and play Hollow Point like basically any other FPS. Don't do this, it's boring and ineffective. Here's some strategies I like to use. Sometimes you'll see a notification for an airdrop. This is a randomly spawned crate that contains tools and weapons you can't get anywhere else. The most interesting of these in my opinion are the ordnance call-ins and the rocket launchers. These can be used to dislodge campers. Another thing I like to do is just dig, even if I'm running somewhere. After a few deaths, you'll have a somewhat protected path to your destination that can more easily be turned into a trench. If enemies start using your trench, you can kill them by placing mines. But just remember that anyone can set off a mine, even you. On maps like Cedar, which is this urban map, you can bring a sledgehammer to break a hole in the road and dig pathways underground. This is something that I don't really see most players do. If you take the time to do this, you can have a safe pathway to a key location that's very difficult for the enemy to detect. I also like to use the sledgehammer on this map to create pathways between connected buildings without having to go outside. On maps like Takama that have small wooden buildings, you can fill in the interiors with dirt to prevent wallbangs. Something I've noticed is that people always like to fight over the high points of a map. For instance, on Iraq, it's this building. If you want all the smoke, go in there and put mines on the stairs, then barricade the sides. HESCO barriers are immune to basically everything, so use those. But that won't protect you from larger explosives like the IED. If you're dealing with people camping the inside of a building, taking down a wall with one of these is a great way of breaching. Not only does the explosion have a good chance of killing them, but the lingering dust and tinnitus sound effect will mask your entry. If you see an enemy hide behind a wall, just keep shooting. There's a good chance that your bullets are going right through whatever cover they're using, unless it's dirt or a HESCO barrier. This is something that took me a while to figure out. Even though they show you the building controls while you use the hammer, if you hold shift while placing items, you don't have to go through the menu again to keep placing more. This last one isn't a real strategy, but it's just funny. If you go into the alignment mode, Y keybind, on the hammer tool, and place landmines, you can put them directly on players, killing them instantly. Known issues. So you might encounter some bugs while playing Hollow Point. All of the ones I've encountered so far are known about, but I'm just going to list them anyway. Sometimes your arms fall off. This doesn't stop you from shooting, but it does stop you from using any tools besides your guns. I think I remember the devs saying that this can happen if you switch tools rapidly with high ping, so I guess try not to do that. Meshes don't interact with the destruction system at all. It's not like you can make them destructible anyway, but this makes the HESCO barriers artificially strong. On the Iraq map, which is soon to be replaced, you actually can't hammer through the road since there's a mesh on top of it. The last one is, there's a noticeable frame drop whenever you get a kill. There are some more things I would consider to be issues, but they're opinions, so I'm just going to move them over to suggestions. I don't mind TDM, but I feel like there should be some kind of visible score in a win condition. People might not agree with me here, but it can be annoying to be stuck on a map for a long period of time. Again, this is just my opinion. I also think they should add the Conquest game mode, which is only limited to one map at the moment, to other maps. I've heard people say that the other maps aren't big enough for Conquest, but I don't think that's true. On Takama, the only map that has the game mode, you have these large dead spaces which only serve to delay both the defenders and attackers. This slows everything down a lot, which is maybe why the game mode is unpopular with the average player. If you put the objectives much closer together, you could definitely fit it on most maps. It would play differently, but I think it would be entertaining. Not all of my suggestions are game mode related. I have one last one. I think you should be able to dig constantly by holding down the mouse on the shovel instead of having to click each time.